live right now, bringing to you fascinating and, of course, captivating history in our lifetime. So it's your presenter as usual. You share your comments and, of course, you ask questions pertaining or regarding history. And without a doubt, we will provide you with an answer regarding your questions asked. We have done several topics that are very fascinating, such as the scramble for and the partitions, indirect rule system, the founding of Banjul, the 19th century jihadist movement here in Africa, and the African nationalist reigning from Marcus Garvey, Kairaba Jawara, E.F. Sumowall. We have also discussed a topic called Senegambia Confederations or Relations Before Independence. So you can ask questions regarding history. So without a doubt, of course, we will provide you with an answer. Good morning, Al-Husseini. Morning. I believe you're okay. So you can comment and you can, of course, ask questions. So you can ask if you have questions. You can, of course, share your comments. You can also contribute towards Historic TV. If you have important questions, then you can ask. So if you have questions, then you can ask. Hello. Yeah. Thank you for texting Historic TV. Your messages are relevant. It will guide us through to know what we should do. So if you have questions, you are from India. All right. How is India and how is life over there? And of course, Indian people tend to be very nice. I really like India and I wish to be there sometime. Amadou Dabo, morning. How are you? I believe you are okay. Okay. Amadou, welcome to Historic, of course, TV. So you can ask questions, you can also comment. Yeah, it's important. Yeah, I believe you are enjoying India. How is the people, how is life, and of course, I believe it's a friendly place. Yeah. Yes, I'm fine. Kamala, I'm fine. And how about you? I'm fine. I'm very fine. So we are live right now to discuss about important topics pertaining history and, of course, looking at the political landscape of Africa. That is the main purpose why we are live right now as Historic TV. So if you have questions regarding African politics, so of course, world affairs, and of course, history, so you may ask, then the questions will be tackled. Yeah, so yes, Kamala, I am doing live right now to discuss about important things in our society like history and of course current or world affairs right now. That is why I'm live. Yeah, so our TV is historic TV. So most often we are always live to give you, a fascinating history. Of course, Amadou Dabo, the boat that took Kunta Kinte was called Lord Lagon. The boat that took Kunta Kinte to finally to America was called Lord Lagon. So I believe Amadou Dabo, I have answered your questions. Kunta Kinte was born, and of course, in the North Bank region of the Gambia, and of course, he was captured by the European powers, taken to an island called San Domingo, then before it was called Andro Island. Then he was there in the island and waited for the ship to arrive. Then when the ship came, he was, put in a ship with some of his colleagues, and the ship that took them was called Lord Lagon at the time. Yeah, Kamala, I'm from a country called the Gambia. So the Gambia is located or is found in a sub-region called West Africa, and West Africa is in a continent called Africa. So the Gambia is the smallest country in Western Africa. That's where I am from. Yeah, Amadou, you are welcome. You are welcome. So Kunta was taken in a boat called Lord Lagon, finally to America, and he never returned back to Africa or in the Gambia. It was his great-great-grandson that came here in this country to know where, his ancestors were from. Yeah, so this was Akunta, exactly. He was from the Gambi Bolongo and captured when he went into the bush to find a drum for his younger brother. Then he was spotted by the Europeans and, of course, taken to an island called San Domingo. Then in that island, the slaves were packed or were encamped there to suppress them, to reduce their rate of resistance. And of course, when they realize that they are weak, and then the ship will arrive and then pack them in the form of a sardine. And finally, the ship will bound to Gore Island, where they will properly locate the mouth of the river. Then finally to America. Yeah, welcome, welcome. That's the reason why we are here to provide you with answers. Yeah, very well. So Kamala, I am from a country called the Gambia. That's why I am from the Gambia. If you have burning issues or important issues regarding the current affairs like Gambian politics or African politics, if you have questions or a doubt regarding history, and of course, you may also ask. So it was the last time that we discussed a topic called the scramble for and the partitions of Africa, how Africa was divided, yeah, into European powers. Hey, I'm on the doubt. Yes, I am watching out. I'm watching out. Yes, I am watching out. I believe you are also watching out. So you can of course share the link to many people in as much as you can. As I was saying, we discussed a topic called the scramble for and the partitions of Africa, how the European came and divided Africa into 54 old nations. It happened in the early 1884 to 1885 at Berlin, when the European powers were engaged in keen competitions over Euro-African territories. They all had an interest here in Africa because Africa was blessed with too much of natural resources, gold, silver, and diamond, men and women. So the European powers, when they came here, they realized that Africa was blessed with too much of natural resources. and they needed these resources for their industries, which was the reason why they all decided to colonize Africa. But there was this country called Congo at the time, very rich in resources, bauxite, iron ore, gold, silver, and diamond, and of course other minerals. So all the European powers had an interest to colonize this country referred to as Congo. So there was a rivalry, there was competitions. So the Portuguese decided, or the Portuguese claimed that they are going to colonize Congo. So they were supported by Britain. Understand? So the French and the Germans, or the Belgians, they opposed that idea, and the Germans rather, they opposed that idea. So to prevent these European powers from not going into a war or the Third World War, the Vice Chancellor of Germany called Otto von Bismarck decided to intervene. And he invited all the European powers who were interested in occupying African territories to attend a conference called at Berlin, Germany. That's why it was called Berlin Conference. And in this conference, African people were not invited. They were not even aware. The European power, they sat with their alcohols, with their coffees. The map of Africa was brought out, then Africa was divided or parceled out into 54 odd nations, and Africa had never been the same again, which was the reason why now today you see some countries in Africa, such as Cameroon, they speak French, such as the Gambia, we speak English as our official language. You go to Senegal, they speak French. You go to Guinea-Bissau, they speak Portuguese as their official language because they were colonized by the Portuguese. You go to Cape Verde, of course, Portuguese. They speak Portuguese as their language, official language rather. So there's no African country that speak its own language as their own official language. So it's all as a result of the scramble for and the partitions of Africa that happened here in this continent 400 years ago. So you would share your comment, and of course, if you have questions, contributions that you want to make, you can go ahead. And of course, we will thank our audience, their love, their appreciations, their support all this while for making us to be monetized. And of course, we will not do justice without having to thank our audience, because without them, we would not be where we are right now. So thank you all for your usual support, your contributions, your encouragement. It really helps us. And we will continue to do more as far as history is concerned. We will travel to different parts of this region, or the countries in this region, and of course beyond this country, to bring to you what you have never had, what your school never taught you before. That is history. And I believe most of the people now, they don't know about the existence of the empire of Cabo. We only know of the three great empires, that are the Songhai, the Mali Empire, and of course the Ghana Empire. But Historic TV, we would give you a gist about the empire called Cabo, with the capital Alcanzar, which is present day in Guinea-Bissau. So thank you, audience. Of course, you can also support Historic TV through buy me coffee. That will also really help us, our channel, because we would not able to do more if we are not financially independent or strong. Yeah, so you can see this live right now. Let it go viral for many people to log in, so that we can have a very fascinating and of course captivating conversation as we had it the previous time. So thank you, audience. Those of you watching out there, thank you so very much. And this is Sunday Live. We are bringing you Sunday Live live video, Historic TV with the audience. So if you have questions regarding history and other related affairs, you can. Wow. So, and those of you watching through in your smart TVs, of course, I am grateful really. So this is Historic TV. Wow, it's really captivating. Yeah, Amadou Dabo, thank you so very much, and of course for your commitment towards Historic TV. I really appreciate it, and of course I applaud you for that. Thank you. I believe too you are enjoying the Sundays. All right. Your questions was really was great. Kunta was taken with a boat called Lord Lagon, and he never returned to the Gambia. It was Alex Haley, his great-great-grandson by the name Alex Haley, was going around to know where, his ancestors were from in Africa. Then finally, he was told, there is a country called the Gambia, perhaps that's where your ancestors are from. Then he came all the way from America to the Gambia to know where his origin. Then finally, he was able to trace where his great-great-grandfather Kunta was from. That was Alex Haley. So for Kunta and his people were taken. He was born in 1755 in a village called Jufre. Then when he reaches manhood, he was circumcised. It's a tradition that most the people are normally circumcised at the age of 18 and above. So at the time, we are having thick forests here in the Gambia, bushes. So he was sent to go and look for a firewood or a drum, base of a drum rather, for his younger brother at home. That's where he was spotted or captured or kidnapped by the European tribes, and of course this was taken to an island called San Domingo. Then the first name of the island was called San Domingo. It was when the island was captured by the Portuguese because they were the first people to arrive in the Gambia. So when he was captured by the Portuguese, then of course he was taken to the island called San Domingo, and there's a sailor called Andrew died in the island, and he was buried in the island. So the name of the island was changed from San Domingo to Andrew Island. So this was how the name Andrew Island came about. Amadou, thank you for your other questions. Which country was the first to experience coup d'etat? It was Togo. The first country in Africa was Egypt, but the first country in West Africa was called Togo in 1963, when young armed officers were armed with guns, with ammunition. They decided to attack and uprooted a government of the people, which was led by Sinfalo Olympio. It was Ngasimbe Ayadema who attacked Sinfalo Olympio with his people. Then he was executed in 1963. So the first country to experience military coup d'etats was Togo. And of course, after that coup d'etats, Africa or West Africa had never been the same again, because coups started to emerge. Coup from different parts of West African countries to another, jumping from one country to another. Our soldiers decided to start uprooting our civilian government one after the other, which was the reason why the first president or the first prime minister called Kwame Nkrumah was ousted from power. And it was through military coup d'etat. the man who struggled for the independence of that country called Ghana, the Gold Coast at the time. Then Ghana also was never at ease because coups started emerging, coups after coups. They start to remove our constituted elected government. We change our government as we change our underwears. Because each and every country in Africa experienced military coup, except Senegal. Gambia, of course, experienced a coup attempt in 1981 when Kuka Sambasani decided to overthrow a constituted elected government on Sadauda. Then Sadauda was at England to attend a wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Gianna. Then at the time, of course, Sadauda and his people, they signed a confederation called Senegambian Confederations. Abdou Diouf was the head and Sadauda Kairaba Jawara was the assistant. Then when Kairaba Jawara heard of, Kuka Sambasani and his people attempting to overthrow his government, then he contacted Abdou Diouf. Then Abdou Diouf was able to send his soldiers here in this country. They were able to uproot, or they were able to remove the impostors and maintain a legal government of Kairaba Jawara. So to answer your questions, is Togo in West Africa, but Egypt is the first in Africa. Mamadou Sellou Diallo, Sellou, the great taste of our time. Mr. T, what are the effects of military intervention in politics? Wow, the effects cannot be overemphasized, really. Military coup d'etats is having a great impact. One of the effects of military intervention is they will never relinquish power or return power to the civilian government. Whenever they uprooted a civilian government, they will promise to stay in power for months or for years, particularly. But then when they start staying in power, they will never want to relinquish power to the civilian government. It's an effect. And the other effects here is suppress the fundamental human right. Our right to freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of expression rather, is automatically seized. In a country whereby there is military coup d'etats, the soldiers will control the mass media, such as the newspapers, such as the radio station and the television, and as a result, the citizens of that country may not have right to exercise their civic right, such as freedom of speech and freedom of movement. And of course, they will decide to hijack the constitution, because in many West African countries, or African countries rather, they have a constitutions. And in their constitution is stipulated the tenure of office holders. Maybe, for every 2 years or 10 years, they go for an elections, or for every 5 years, they go for an elections. But whenever the civilian government, come into power, they will hijack the constitution. They will never want to subscribe to a constitution. And the rule of law, of course, is not observed. They will not observe rule of law. Equality before the law, protection of fundamental human rights, they will not observe that one. And the other effect is they will withdraw themselves from international organizations. They will not want to take part in the activities of ECOWAS, in the activities of OAU, UN, and Commonwealth. They will completely withdraw. So it's an effect of military intervention in African politics. It's very detrimental. But note, the best system of governance or government is a military system. It's the best so far. But it is having a great impact, really. So, Sellou, thank you so very much for your questions. Yeah. Mohammed Dahaba. Yeah, of course, I'm fine. Mohammed Dahaba, I'm fine. Yes, you can ask your questions. Yeah, you can ask your questions, and perhaps, possibly, we may provide you with an answer, inshallah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mr. Dahaba, Amunjai, quietly learning a lot. Thank you, Amo. Thank you so very much. And of course, Mohammed, the demands that were put forward by the Gambian nationalists in the British colonial government. When the British colonized our country, they introduced a system called indirect rule system. They used our kings and queens to rule us indirectly. So at the time, we had some Gambian called educated elite, the first Gambian to acquire Western education, ranging from Sadauda Kairaba Jawara, P.S. Njai, I.M. Gaba Jampa, Mamadou E. Jallow. These were all Gambian nationalists, and of course, they were elites, educated elites. these educated elites were not allowed to take part in Gambian politics because the European, they don't want the Gambian educated or the African educated people to take charge in their own affairs. That's why they decided to push aside this educated elite. At some point, these people were dissatisfied about colonial rule and of course about colonial government in the Gambia. They start to agitate for their independence. During that period of agitations, there were certain demands that were put forward to the colonial government. One among the demands was constitutional reform. It was our Gambian nationalists who started to agitate that they need a constitutional reform to enable the Gambian people to take charge in their own affairs, to enable the Gambian people, of course, to take part in Gambian politics. That was a constitutional reform because the constitution at that time did not allow Gambian people to take part in the affairs of the Gambia, Gambian politics rather. So another demand that was put forward by our Gambian educated elites was Gambian people to take part in the legislative council elections. Meaning, at the previous constitutions, the Gambian were not allowed to take part in the legislative council because they were not allowed to exercise their franchise. So the people at the protectorate, or sorry, at the colony at the time, the educated elite, they put a demand that they need to take part in Gambian politics, and which means that they have to be part of the legislative council, which was the reason why Edward Francis Sumol was the first Gambian to be elected in the legislative council. Was a demand. The other demand that was put forward by the Gambian nationalists was social and economic reform, because for a long period of time, there was less development, slow pace of development. The Gambian people were paying tax, but yet the tax that they are paying, they were not realizing the tax being paid to the colonial government. They decided to put a demand that they need social and economic reform for the British to start developing the Gambia, because the Gambian people were tired at the time. They were tired. So it's also another demand that was put forward by the Gambian nationalists to the colonial government. So these are some of the demands that were put forward by our Gambian nationalists. Nationalists were those people who struggled for the independence of our country. They demanded certain things from the colonial government because they were deprived of their right. They were not allowed to take charge in their own affairs. So ranging from constitutional reform, from enabling the Gambian educated elite to take part in Gambian politics, social and economic reforms, these were all demands that were put forward by the Gambian nationalists. So I believe I have answered your questions, Mohammed Dahaba. Thank you so very much for your questions. Amunja here, thank you. Thank you for being online, sacrificing your time, for being with Historic TV. We really appreciate your time, all of you. So thank you. So it's important that we know the history of our country. And of course, I would like to ask questions if you people to see if the Gambian people really know about the history of the Gambia. Of course, in 1899, there was an incident that happened in the Gambia, in the south bank of this country. An incident happened between the British and our Gambian people. So who can tell me what is the name, or what was the name given to that incident that happened in 1899 between the British and the Gambian people in the South Bank region? If you have questions, you can ask. Really fascinating. Selu, thank you. the positive effects of military interventions in politics. Here, effects here could be both negative and positive. So one of the positive effects of military intervention in African politics is a military government can take decisions that civilian government cannot take. Because for the militaries, these are people that are always bold. They are always with courage to take decisions that a civilian government cannot take. So it's an advantage because the civilian government, before they take decisions, it must pass from one stage to another before the decisions is finally implemented. But for the military government, they will just take immediate decisions. So it's an advantage. The other advantage or the positive effects of military government, they ensure quick or fast pace of development. They promote rapid development. Just like, for instance, we look into what they call in Ivory Coast, in Burkina Faso, when Thomas Sankara came into power through coup d'etats, there was rapid development. Right now, in the same country, Burkina Faso, there is rapid development because they are still under military rule, coup d'etats. So military government promote rapid development. That's why when you looked at Jammeh, when he came into power, before he came into power, there was slow pace of development. But when he came into power through coup d'etats, then the government development start to advance. So it's a positive effect of military interventions. So these are some of the positive effects of military interventions in politics. They will take decisions quickly and sharply without having to waste any time. And of course, they will promote rapid developments in a country. They will also fight corruptions and bribe military government. Whenever the soldiers, came into power, they will discourage totally corruptions and bribery. So, Professor Selu Jallow, thank you so very much for your questions. More questions coming. They are really captivating, of course, important and interesting. So keep sharing, keep sharing, keep sending your comments. They are important, and of course, we'll be giving you positive answers. My questions, no one's answered my questions still. So this is political socialization. It is when people learn to adopt norms, values, and behaviors in a country. Is called political socialization. In a country whereby people learn norms of each other, values of each other's, that is called political socialization. So it's important for the government people to learn this, what they call political socialization. It promotes peace and harmony in a country, because in political socializations, people learn to embrace each other. People learn to live without any violence. So to answer your questions, political socialization, this refers to values, norms, behaviors of a people accepted and practiced in a country. Political socialization. So this is Historic TV Live on Sundays, giving you a captivating and of course fascinating history that happened in this country. In fact, let me take you through what happened in 1899 at a place called Sankande. Sankande is a village located at the south bank of the Gambia. Okay, named for founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity. Mohammed Dahaba, thank you so very much. The Organization of African Unity was formed in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963, when African countries started to gain their political independence, there was a need for continental organizations in order to help the African to have a forum to discuss and solve their problems or their grievances. At the beginning, there was a disagreement about the real aim and the modes of operandi about the organization called the African Unity. Some countries decided to form their own international organization referred to as the Monrovian Bloc. And the other one decided to support or to form their own organization called the Casablanca Bloc. It was in 1963 when 32 heads of sovereign independent African states decided to put their political difference aside and came together. They converged in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, under the leadership of Emperor Haile Selassie. They signed a charter which resulted in the formations of the African Union. And in fact, it was in 2002, the name was formally changed from African Organization of African Unity to African Union to better capture the organization. And of course, it was in 2011, South Sudan, which was the last country to attain her political independence, joined the Organization of African Unity, now called the African Union. And of course, as of now, this organization comprises of 54 countries that are part of the African Union. The names of the founding fathers who were behind the formations of the organization called African Union, it includes Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, Modibo Keita of Mali, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Sekou Touré of Guinea-Conakry, Flex Boigny of Ivory Coast, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Sir Milton Magari. These were all Africans who converged in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and they signed an agreement or a charter which resulted to the formations of the Organization of African Unity. But as of now, it is called African Union. So these were some of the great African, in fact, they were nationalists. Some of them were the first prime ministers of their country, such as, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. We have Modibo Keita of Mali, Leopold Sédar Senghor, Sekou Touré, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Flex Boigny of Ivory Coast, Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. So these were all great Africans who converged in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and they formed a continental organization, which was the first international organization to be formed here in the Gambia in 1963 in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. Thank you, Mohammed Dahaba. Thank you. Selu Jalo, thank you for your question. Nationalists are people who fought for the independence of their country are called nationalists. These are those great Africans who stood on their feet and say no to European imperialism and say no to colonialism. They were called nationalists. Among them in the Gambia, we had Kairaba Jawara or David Jawara. We also had E.F. Small, Edward Francis Small. We also had I.M. Garba Jahumpa, Mamadou Ibrahima Garba Jahumpa, who formed a third political party called the Muslim Congress Party. Exactly. So these are called nationalists. Mamadou Ijala, we are all nationalists. Safariman Singate, we are nationalists. So nationalists are people who struggle or who fought for the independence of their country. We are called nationalists. So thank you for your questions. Mr. Sello, I know sometime you also become a historian. So thank you for your questions. I really appreciate it. Amadou Dabo, you asked me to come again, sir. I do not understand. Can you please send your question again, Amadou Dabo? Yeah, send your questions again. It's important. So I was discussing what they call the Sankandi incident. It happened in the South Bank of the Gambia. There was a village at the time between Sankandi, it was called Sankandi. And between Sankandi and Jataba, there was a piece of a rice field, a farmland. This incident happened in the Gambia in 1899 between the British and the Gambian people, referred to as Sankandi incident. There was a piece of a rice field for which the Soninkes of Jataba claimed that they are the owner of the piece of land. Likewise, the Marabouts of Sankandi, of course, claim that they are the owner of the piece of land. Out of hand. The matter was, out of hand. So the issue was reported to the traveling commissioner of the South Bank called Sidwell. During the colonial period, the Gambia was, having traveling commissioners, British traveling commissioners. One of them was called Sidwell, and the other one was called Sidwell. So Sidwell was responsible for the South Bank, and Silva was responsible for the North Bank. The matter was reported to Sidwell. And Sidwell, he invited these two parties at Bataling, which was 15 kilometers away from Sankande. The Soninkes of Jataba responded to the call, to the invitations of Sidwell, but the Marabouts never responded to the invitations. Which angered Sidwell. He decided to go by himself to Sankande, but he was accompanied by his friend Silva, and of course the 6 British police officials and the king of Bataling, who was called Mansakoto Nyako Sanyang. Upon their arrival at the village, they asked the then king of Sankande called Boribana Dabo to come out for a meeting. So the king responded that the meeting should be held at the local meeting place called Bantaba. Sidwell demanded, the king disagreed. Sidwell was very angry at the time, So he ordered the arrest of the king of Sankande, Boribana Dabo. He did not even stop there. He ordered the total dismissal of the king, Boribana Dabo. And he decided to constitute another king, who was a Soninke king called Mansakoto. Of course, the people, Boribana Dabo, of course, when they started to arrest him, he started for hell for his village folks. So his village folk came with their guns, they shoot at Silva, Sidwell, the 6 British police officials, and the king of Bataling, Mansakoto. They all died or perished at Sankande. This is the reason why today we are learning this, this history called Sankande incident. Very important. So Selu, the king of Jakaba was Jereba Amarong. No. The Jereba Amarong was the king of Badibo. At the time there was Soninke Marabo. So the king of Badibo at the time was called Jereba Amarong. So the king of Sankande was called Boribana Dabo, who was the king of Sankande at the time. So Jereba Amarong was the king of Badibo. Ibrahima Toure, thanks for your support, bro. Yeah, Ibrahima Toure, thank you so very much. You are great. You are really great. So thank you so much. Yeah, Selu, I believe I clarified that point. So the king of Sankande was called Boribana Dabo. So it was Jereba Amarong was the king of Badibo at the time. So Badibo, there was a Marabo that hailed from Badibo called Maba Jahoba. He was the first Gambian to wage a holy war in the North Bank region of the Gambia called Badibo. And for him, he was killed at the battle called Somme in 1867. He was killed by the British, and his head was cut off and taken to the French at Gore. And he was succeeded later by his son called Saint Martin. Yeah, and of course, this is just a gist about Sankande. So we will, of course, be visiting Sankande soon. And I believe you will learn a lot about Sankande. People have been hearing about Sankande, but they don't know actually where is Sankande and what transpired in Sankande. Yeah, what transpired in Sankande. Of course, what about Jataba? There was the king was, Sankande and Jataba, they were 2 villages now. They are just 2 villages, but they were separated by a piece of land, a rice field. So the villages were not far apart. So a group of Gambians live in Sankande, were called the Marabouts. They believe in Islam, they practice Islam. Another group were called the Soninkes. They live in Jataba. They also had a ruler at the time, not a king, but perhaps a chief at the time. Do you understand? But the king was from Sankande, who was called Boribana Dabo. Do you understand? But at the beginning, in the pre-colonial Gambian society, before the coming of Islam, both of them were Soninke. But when Islam came, for the Cabanese people were threatened, started to convert people into Islam. So the people of Sankande, most of them became Muslims. So they practice Islam. So most of the people also that were living in Jataba, they did not practice Islam. So at the time in Jataba, there was a chief at the time. So the king was from Sankande. Yeah, Selu. So Selu, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your questions. So it's important. Thank you all. Thank you. And of course, I believe we have learned the three greatest empires that emerged in Africa. But people, there are many people don't know about the Kabu Empire. There was another empire that emerged, Kabu Empire. This empire was founded by the cousins and a general of Sunjata Keita called Teraman Trawale. One of the finest and the greatest general or a warrior of Sunjata Keita was called Teraman Trawale. He came down to the Senegambian region. He was sent by Sunjata to come and collect tax on his behalf. When he came, he founded an empire called Kabu Empire. So Teraman was a cousin to Sunjata, and Sunjata was born a cripple. For 7 years, he was unable to walk. His mother too, Sonkolo, was a cripple. So a cripple became a leader and a great warrior that founded an empire in 1537 called Mali Empire, with the capital at Gao. So we will also take you through the greatest empires, such as the Zulu Empire, the Kabu Empire, the Ghana, of course, called the Gold Coast, the Songhai Empire, which started life as a small kingdom called Al Kaukau, with the capital at Kukia. So these were all great empires that emerged in Africa. So you can, of course, react. You can show your reaction to the live video, and you can also share the link. It's important. As you are watching, other people also may want to learn, then you can just react. Your comments, you can send your reactions, and you may also send the live to other people so that they can also be watching us live. And this is Historic TV. Your comments and contributions are highly appreciated. So Selu, thank you. Important. Amadou Dabo, thank you so very much. It's important. Yeah. So you can still send in your comments. They are really fascinating. Yeah. So it's important because so you can send in your comments. So it's important. Yeah. So we of course discussed a long time ago the founding of Banjul, Batos. Once upon a time, an island called Banjul was founded. But before it was called Banjul, it was called Banjulu. Banjul was an island infested with baobab trees. Yes, Mohammed Dahabak, I can briefly explain the British reaction to the Sankande. Okay, when the Sankande incident happened, the British were informed about what happened in Sankande. Then the British were in Banjul in the colony. During the colonial period, the Gambia was divided into two, the protectorate and the colony. So when the British heard of the terrible incident that happened in Sankande, they run quickly to Sankande. So upon their arrival in Sankande, they decided to arrest the prominent people in Sankande, such as the alcalos, the chiefs in Sankande. The alcalos and the chiefs of Sankande were arrested and they were taken and they were in prison in Batos. Some of them died in Sankande. And another reactions of the British in Sankande was they decided to put an end to the war of Fode Kaba Dumbe because they believe that Fode Kaba instigated the people of Sankande to kill Silva Sidwell, the 6 policemen, and the king of Batali. So one of their reactions was they went all the way to Sankande and arrested the prominent leaders, the people. The king, Bori Banadabo, and his people were all arrested and they were taken, they were in prison. Some of them died. They also decided to put an end to the Soninke Marabo that were brought in by Fode Kaba because it brought loss of life, famine. And it also, reduced the British, colonization of the Gambia. It slowed down their speed of colonizing the Gambia. So they reacted sharply. And because of the Sankande incident, Fode Kaba was put to an end. The Sankande incident, it happened in 1899. And of course, 2 years later, 1901, Fode Kaba was executed in his hometown called Medina in 1901. He was attacked in all angles by the British, the French, and his great enemy called Musa Molo. They joined alliance together. They launched a simultaneous assault on Fode Kaba. And he had no route to escape. He was gunned down and he died. So this is how the British reacted to Sankande incident. This is how the British reacted to Sankande incident of 1899. So thank you so very much for your comment, Mohamed Daba. Yeah, Selu, the French ruling system. The French were among the European powers who visited Africa. They were also strangers. But let Africa know that the strangers that visited Africa were many, ranging from the Arabs. The European came, the French. The French came here and captured, in fact, they were one time in the Gambia here, but they were unable to withstand because they were not that much powerful. They left the Gambia to Senegal. So the French introduced a system in African colonies called assimilation. Assimilation was a system which was aimed to transform the African people into French black men. It was called assimilation. It was in this assimilation they recognized our African elite. That is why at the time in Senegal, when a person was born in Gorée, in Refesik, in Saint Louis and Dakar, you are considered to be a French citizen. You have equal right with those that are born in France. That was totally different from the British. The British at the time, even when you are born inside the governor's house, in the governor's bedroom, you will never and ever become a British citizen. But for the French, when we are born in these 4 communes, commune is a French word, but in English it means community. If we were born in these 4 communities like Dakar, Saint Louis, Gorée, you are considered to be a French citizen. And because of that, many people automatically gain citizenship. So the system of administration was called assimilation. This assimilation here means to transform black people into French men. And they recognize our traditional institution. They recognize our culture because they allow our people to rule us. And then in the later years, they introduce what they call association. Is it similar to what they call a direct system? The British were using indirect system. So for the French also, they used a direct system to rule our people. But their system of administration was different from that of the Portuguese. For the French, they consider some of the African people who were born in some of the recognized communes to be considered as French citizens. And their system was called assimilation, which was later changed to association. So thank you for your comments. It's important. Yeah. Your contributions are highly appreciated. Your comments is important. Thank you for this is a Sunday, of course, a relaxing moment for many people out there. Uh, this day and this early moment, we are giving you an important and captivating history that happened here. Of course, for the Portuguese, of course, they were also one time, in fact, historian records that the first European nation or tribes that arrived or that visited Africa were called the Portuguese. In the Gambia, the first Portuguese explorer was called Alvisto Cadamosto. He arrived in the mouth of the Gambia in 1455. So when the Portuguese came in the Gambia, they were the first people to capture an island called San Domingo, which was later called Ando Island. So they were attacked and removed by the British, and the British finally captured the Gambia. So among the British colonies in Africa was Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. They introduced a system called assimilation, similar to that of the Portuguese. And their citizens were called assimilado. In the Portuguese colony at the time, they divided their people into two. Their people were tested. They were given exams, just like primary school exam. Those who passed were called the assimilado, and those who failed were called the natives. So those who passed the exams were more considered. They are the most important people in the Portuguese colony at the time. So those people were given title referred to as assimilado, mean Portuguese citizens. So their system of administration was called assimilation, similar to that of the French. But there was also another group of strangers that visited Africa called the Germans. The Germans were the first to come, the last to come in Africa. They are the first to leave, because for the German, they were not interested to occupy African countries at the time. The Germans colonized Tanganyika at that time, and of course Congo, of course, as well at the time. But they left early this country because they were not interested in colonizing African territories. But their system called paternalism was one of the most brutal systems ever introduced here by any European time. German paternalism. For them, they thought that, or they considered themselves to be superior than any other race. And as a result, they had a divine guidance to rule the black people. That's why millions of Congolese died. King Leopold killed many Congolese. King Leopold of Belgium killed Congolese. So the Germans were never interested to colonize African colonies. They are the last to come, they are the first to leave. When they came, they introduced a system called as German paternalism, which means that they have divine guidance to rule the black people. They are superior to the black people. Black people were useless species on earth. This was the concept they had at the time. And their system was very brutal. So that was German paternalism. So, Mr. Selu, thank you so very much for your questions. Thank you so very much for your questions. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Your time, of course, is highly appreciated. We really appreciate your time. This is Historic TV, and thank you for your time. And keep them coming still. You're going to learn a lot, of course. It's important. So captivating and, of course, interesting at the moment. Historic TV is important. Keep your comments coming, and we would give you fascinating and, of course, interesting. If you have comments, contributions, you can ask. It's important. Yes, Mohammed, identify any 5 reasons that brought the defeat of Musa Molo Balde by the British. Musa Molo was a son to Alpha Molo, and Alpha Molo's real name was called Molo Ige Balde. He was an elephant hunter and a warrior. He led the Fullas to invade the empire of Cabo with the capital at Kansala. So after the invasion of Cabo Empire, Alpha Molo ruled for 4 years. 1874, he died at a place called Dandu. Dandu today is found in Guinea-Bissau. So the Fuladu Empire was founded in 1870. When Alpha Molo died, he was succeeded by his brother called Bakari Demba because Musa Molo at the time was too young to succeed. So for Musa, I don't want any trouble to occur at the time. He allowed his uncle Bakari Demba to rule Fuladu Empire. But Bakari Demba was deviating from Alpha Molo's policy. He started to return back to the state of animism, worshipping of trees and animals. Musa Molo and Bakari Demba don't see eye to eye. So Musa Molo raised a great army. They start to attack Bakari Demba. And finally, Bakari Demba was executed. Then Musa Molo became the sole ruler of the empire of Fuladu. And Musa Molo at the time was a friend to both the British and the French. And which was the reason why in his foreign policy, he was a friend to both the British and the French. Whenever he had a problem with the French, he ran to the British side. Whenever he had a problem with the British, he'll go to the French side. This was how he was doing his things. Then, Mohammed, your question is identify 5 reasons that brought the defeat of Musa Molo Balde by the British. Musa Molo did not have a strong army compared to that of Fode Kaba, because Fode Kaba was having a very strong and powerful army. For Musa Molo, he did not have a strong army, and as a result, he was defeated by the British. And the other reason why Musa Molo was defeated, because Musa Molo was not in good time with the French at the time, because he was alone. He don't have a well-standing army, and he was not having any support from the French. And as a result, he was invited by the British to answer to a call in battles. That's why he was arrested. He was deported to Sierra Leone. So Musa would not have any strong or standing army that will be used to fight the British. And second, Musa Molo too was not in good time with the French, because as he was dealing with the British, the same time he was also dealing with the French. So they were not in good time with each other. That's why he was arrested by the British, deported to Sierra Leone. And the other reason was Musa Molo also was not friendly to his people, because at some point he was amazing of playing with weapons and killing slaves and his wives. And as that, some of his people boycotted him. They supported the European powers. And Musa Molo was finally captured and deported to Sierra Leone. He was not in good time with his people. Musa also was not kind to his people. He was suppurative. He was very, very cruel to his people, Musa Molo. then that's why he was also defeated by arresting him and taken by the British, deported. So Mohamed Dabo, these are some of the answers that I have for your questions. If you have, of course, other follow-up questions, then you may ask. So thank you so very much for being in line throughout. Mohamed Dabo, I'm so very much grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Your questions are really interesting. As I was explaining at the beginning, I said there was an island found in the Gambia called Banjulu at the time. So Banjulu was an island surrounded with baobab trees, which served as a hideout for the criminals and the runaway slaves at the time. The local inhabitants called the Baninquas, they call the place as Banjulo, meaning a place where people can go and find rope for tying their ruminant animals. So at the time, there was slavery and slave trade in the Gambia. In 1814, British and the French signed an agreement called the Paris Peace Treaty in Paris, France, to end the long rivalry between the British and the French over the Senegambian region. The British and the French at the time, they were all interested, or they all had an interest in the Senegambian region. So there was a rivalry, an intense rivalry between the British and the French in the Senegambian region. It was in 1814 that an agreement was signed called a treaty. And this treaty recognized the British control over River Gambia while the French control over River Senegal. Having lost Gore, before this treaty, the British also captured Gore Island. So after this treaty, British, they lost Gore. They decided to reoccupy their old base called James Island, but they realized that the island was in a bad condition. And at this time, there was a need for them to suppress or to put an end to slavery and slave trade. And as a result, there was no place better strategically located than Banjul called Batos. That's why on the 23rd of April, 1816, Captain Alexander Grant, he went to Batos. He obtained Banjul from the king of Combo called Tumani Bojang by the annual payment of 113 bars of irons, which was equivalent to 25 British pounds. This was how Banjul was founded. And when it was founded, the name was changed from Banjul to Batos. It was named after Charles Batos. So this is just a brief intro about the founding of Banjul, an island called Banjul. Yeah. So your comments are highly important. Yeah. So you can send your comments, your contributions. It's important that we know our history. If you cut your chain and the circles that ties you, you may leave. But if you cut your root, you will surely die as a person. So history is our root now. You must learn history is important in our lifetime. Because without history, we are nothing as human beings. The only thing that we learn history is we learn nothing from history. So we need to start learning something from history. So you can send your comments. It's important. let's so you can you can react to the live video. It's really going to help us. Your reactions is really going to help us, and without your support as our audience, we may not be able to be here. And thank you for helping us to be monetized. Thank you for making us to to hit the monetization. And without a doubt, we will of course provide you people what you know not about. Fascinating and of course captivating history that happened in Africa and of course Africa and beyond. So your contributions is highly appreciated, and you can of course help us by buying me coffee. It's also another platform where we can easily earn to continue to thrive. So it's important. And of course, we will look into what they call neocolonialisms. A new strand visited Africa called neocolonialism. After the scramble for and the partitions of Africa in 1884-1885, then Africa was colonized by the European powers for decades, for years, for centuries. The Europeans were never tired of visiting Africa. I wonder why in our lifetime. Now, a new strand is in existence in Africa called neocolonialism. The control of the economy of a country by a rich and a powerful one, neocolonialism. The Europeans are colonizing the African people through neocolonialism. They control our economy. They control each and every sector in Africa here. That's the reason why Africa is never at ease. They will pump huge amount of money to African countries. And if we are unable to pay, they will dictate us what we are going to do. That's why now many African countries succumb to European ideologies and ideas and concepts and philosophy. We cannot be able to strive to stand on our own if neocolonialism is still in existence. It's even dangerous than AK-47 that you are seeing, neocolonialism. That's why even today, some of the reserve banks of African countries is in France. That's why we're going to be able to develop without the intervention of European powers. Look at our stadiums. Most of them were constructed by the Chinese or by the Europeans. How many countries are having engineers that make their own machines, their own electricity? How many countries in Africa? Neocolonialism now. Most of our African roads were constructed by the Chinese or by the European. And in return, they will demand something from the African state, that is our resources. We are having resources, but we cannot be able to mine our resources. Neocolonialism. When African people, young men and women now, are flying through the bag, we're dying at the Mediterranean Sea, when our leaders will stand and watch. Neocolonialisms. We must stand on our feet and fight or say no to neocolonialism. If not, we would not withstand in our lifetime. That is why now they are putting their say in most of the things that should be run by African people. Which African country here manufacture guns? Instead, they keep on manufacturing bullets. How can a bullet be useful without gun? Which among the African countries can manufacture a mobile phone and the ingredients used to make mobile phone is found here in Africa. Neocolonialism. We must start to liberate our minds. We must have African concept to rule the African people. But we cannot have white man's concept or European concept to rule African people. It never works. So neocolonialism is a detriment to the African people. It's a threat to the African people. Mohamed Dahaba, a question. And the first European nation to join the race for what territories in West Africa was. I do not understand your questions. The first European nation to join the race for territories in West Africa. I do not understand your questions. Can you restructure your questions again? What I know for sure is the first European nation to arrive in Africa were the Portuguese. But the Portuguese, they had the least colony in Africa. They are the first to come, and they had the least colonies here in Africa. So Mohamed Daba, if you can restructure your questions, I would really appreciate that. So. So keep your comments coming. Keep your questions coming. Of course, this is Sunday Live Historic TV at the moment. So, Mohamed Dava, you can please, and of course, restructure your questions so I would understand perhaps. So viewers or audience, you can even help us by, of course, through buying me coffee. It's also another platform that can help this channel to thrive, to continue to rise, and to bring you fascinating things. Yeah, so it's important. So thank you for your usual support and your cooperations. We really appreciate it. Mohammed, which of the European countries is responsible for initiating the abolition of slave trade? It was the British. Mohammed, the country that was responsible to initiate the abolitions of the slave trade was the British. They were the first country to start to campaign for the suppression or for the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. That's why most of the humanitarians at the time, they were the British. Granville Sharp, William Wilberforce, Thomas Clarkson, they were all British now. Even Abraham Lincoln. So most of them were British. So the Britain was a country that was responsible for initiating the suppressions of the transatlantic slave trade, which was the most difficult form of slave trade that ever existed in the surface of this earth. The largest form of human trafficking was the transatlantic slave trade. And the journey from Africa, when slaves were taken from Africa to America, was called the Middle Passage. It was in this journey when most of our African people, they perished. Some were thrown on board. Women were raped. Men were beaten. Some, their hands were cut. Oh, it was very difficult at the time. Transatlantic slave trade. Why was it called transatlantic slave trade? Because it had 3 stages or legs. from Europe to Africa when the Europeans would bring in their goods to Africa and exchange with things, exchange with human beings. When they had slaves, the slaves were now taken to America to work in the plantations with little water and little food. When they cultivate their farm produce, they were now shipped and then taken to Europe. That's why it was called triangular slave trade. So Mohammed, thank you. So keep your comments coming. Your contributions, of course. Keep them coming. So you can ask questions, and of course, it will provide you with an answer. Which country, which British English-speaking country has to attain her political independence from the hands of our colonial master here in Africa, in West Africa? Momodou Sékou Diallo, colonial administrations. The colonial administrations that were introduced in the Gambia was called indirect rule system. A colonial administration or system introduced in Senegal was called assimilation, which was later changed to associations. A colonial administration introduced in Guinea-Bissau was Portuguese assimilations. And in Tanganyika, now called Tanzania, it was called German paternalism. So that is the colonial administration introduced or used by the colonial masters to administer our African colonies. Colonial administrations. So thank you for your comment one more time, Mr. Silu. For your comment. It's important, it's captivating. That was colonial administrations. Okay, the pre-colonial administrations, or rather, means before the coming of the Europeans, how the African people were able to administer themselves, to rule themselves. Before the coming, or prior to the coming of the European, the African people were using local system of administration through the kings and the chiefs, local king or the traditional rulers were used to rule the African people indirectly. That was called pre-colonial administration. Now, in the Mandinka social political organization, they had a king referred to as Mansa. So the Mansa was succeeded by his eldest male son in case when he dies. The Mansa was just like a king. He was responsible for the collection of tax, allocations of land, settlements of disputes, taking part in community work. He served as a symbol of unity in the pre-colonial Gambian society, in the Mandinka political organization. So in Africa or in the Gambia, Our kings and chiefs were the local rulers, were the very ones ruling their own people. Because each and every society at the time in Africa, they had tribes. Each and every tribe, they had their ruler. For the Maninka, it was called the Mansa. For the Fulas, it was the Imam. And the Fulas practiced a theocratic system of administration purely based on Islam, the Sharia law. The states ruled by imams were called the imamates. So the imam served as the political ruler of the state. He led the army into battle. And these imams are always well versed in Quran and Quranic recitation. They settle disputes, allocate land. And you come to the world of political organizations, they were ruled by a king referred to as Bur. In the world of kingdom, it comprised of 6 world of states in the Gambia: Siin, Salum, Kayor, Bawal, Jolof. Now, this was what they called world of confederations. They were ruled by a Bur called Burba Jolof, the Bur of Jolof, because where the Bur was residing was called Jolof. Now, for the Jolas society, for the Jolas, they practice decentralized system of administration. It means they recognize themselves as equal. Both men and women could become a ruler. The male ruler was called Akanda, and the female ruler was called Ai. The Jolas live in complete isolations. They only come together whenever there is war or initiation ceremonies. That is why in the Jolas political organization or social organization, they don't divide themselves into different classes, such as the nobles, the artists, and the slaves. No, they were all equal. So that was the pre-colonial administration. The African people were administering themselves without the interventions of Europeans. The king or the chiefs were chosen by the village heads. And they normally take the oath of allegiance to protect the state. They were appointed by the council of king makers or kingmakers. So, Selu, that is the answer for your questions. Thank you so very much. Endeavoring, sacrificing your time for our life, of course, shooting. Much appreciated. Keep your comments coming. Keep your comments. The goods from the Silk Road reach the Gambia. Perhaps the goods from the Silk Road, are you referring to the goods that were transported with the use of train in the colonial society, during the colonial era, reaches the Gambia? Is that your questions? Perhaps maybe you can just restructure your questions. The goods from the Silk Road reach the Gambia. Yes, the spices at the time were, some of them were not reaching the Gambia at the time, because the colonial ruler, the road that they constructed, their roads were not up to the Gambia at the time. So what happened was, the goods were normally shipped, were normally put in a ship and now taken. That was the most useful way that they were taken. So the goods that they were having here in this country were normally taken with the use of the sea and taken to their destinations. So if I answered your questions, at the times. So during the colonial period, most of them were coming in Africa with the use of a sea. So whenever they have access to our African resources, they were taken with the use of a ship. But in some countries like Freetown, they have what they call roads, railways. So the goods were normally taken in with the use of the railways. Yes. So thank you for your questions. Thank you so very much. Yeah, thank you so very much. Thank you. And which country are you from? Thank you. So during the colonial period, most of there was like a lack of technological advancement. Yeah, so there was lack of technological advancement, and as a result, the Europeans were unable to construct roads in each and every colony here in Africa. So the Gambia here is navigable. So you can use the river Gambia to travel from Gambia to America or Europe. So that is why they were transporting their goods with the use of the sea at the time. All right, from Canada, how is life over there? And I believe you are enjoying as of now. So this is Historic TV. I wish you will subscribe to our channel, and of course we'll be happy if you subscribe to our channel. And of course, we're contributing towards yeah, the development of our TV, that is Historic TV. So really, we will appreciate your contributions. Thank you. So Canada is a country that I wish to go someday, sometime. So thank you. Yeah, Selu, another time, another questions again, judicial review. Yeah, judicial review at the time, during the colonial period, as I mentioned earlier, they were not allowing our African people to participate in the African politics, the Europeans. So when our African people start to agitate for constitutional reform, now in this constitutional reform, that's where, of course, judicial review, of course, took place as well. They want to make sure that the African nationalists or the Gambian nationalists, the few educated Gambian people, to take part in Gambian politics. And to take part in Gambian politics, one must take part in the activities of the legislature, in the activities of the executive, in the activities of the judiciary in our country. So it happened in the judicial review. It's just like not all the British who were in the Gambia should participate in the judiciary sector of the Gambia. Gambian people at the time also, of course, wanted to participate in the judiciary sector of the Gambia. So thank you for your comments. Well appreciated. Well appreciated. So the people of Canada out there, thank you for watching our live from different parts of this country. As far as you are watching us right now from the Gambia here, we are saying thank you so very much. Thank you, and you can of course subscribe to Historic TV. We really appreciate. Modu Lamin Ba, thank you for your question, Professor Ba. How were the educated elites part of the legislature? During the colonial period, during the era of colonialism, the British were not allowing our educated elites, the first Gambian to acquire Western education, to participate or to partake in the political activities of the Gambia. It was when the Gambian educated elite started to agitate for constitutional reform to reform our constitution, to look after or to take a look again of our Gambian constitution during the colonial period. So after the constitution reformed, there is a portion in the constitution which allow the Gambian people now to participate in their own affairs. And when the Gambian people were allowed, then elections were conducted. So Gambians who may want to mount position in the legislature, of course, during the times of elections, they will campaign in the colony at the time, because note that election at the time during the colonial period was only confined in the colony, Banjul and Kombo St. Mary. So they will do their campaign. People such as P.S. Njai, E.F. Small will be campaigning, and of course, that's why the reason E.F. Small became the first Gambian to be elected in the House of Representatives. Because after the constitutional reform, Gambian people were now allowed to take part in the affairs of their state. Then Small won an election, and of course, she was a member of the legislature. This is how the Gambian people start to become member of the legislature. But at the beginnings, they were never allowed to be members of legislature. So Modlamin Ba, of course, thank you for your questions. It is much more appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for your support, your contributions. Much appreciated from you people. Without you, we cannot able to thrive. Without our audience, we will be stagnant. So, yeah, thank you, Professor Modlamin Ba. Thank you so very much, Professor. Thank you. Keep your comments coming. Thank you for saving us from ignorance. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Doing our best to make sure that African people learn from what happened in the past, and very well. Yeah, Momodu Selu, independence of the judiciary. Basically, there are three organs or arms of a government: executive, judiciary, and of course, the legislature. So a judiciary is an independent organ of government which is mandated to interpret the law and punish the lawbreakers. So it is incumbent in each and every country across the globe to have an independent judiciary system, so that the judges, the lawyers can pass fair judgment. They can able to interpret the constitutions fairly without any bias or favoritism. That is why it is important or significant in our lifetime for our judiciary to be independent, because without our judiciary being independent, there will be no fair play in a country. There will be bias. People will not succumb to the constitution. So an independent judiciary system is a judiciary system whereby there is free transparency. There is what they call accountability in the way in which they pass their judgment. Just like that of the Gambia is an independent judiciary system. They are not under the control of an individual. They are not under the influence of an individual. They are doing their jobs based on how the Gambian people expect from them. So, Modlamin, when the educated elites were part of the legislature, what benefit did Gambian people benefit? What are the benefits that the Gambian people derive is important. When the Gambian people were part of the legislature, the Gambian people play an important role to see that the rights of the Gambian people is heard. The voice of the Gambian people is heard. And in fact, because of the Gambian people being part of the legislature, the Gambian people were able to push further. In fact, when Small became a member of the legislature, he helped many Gambians to win seat and became a member. So the Gambian people were debating in the House of Representatives for the European powers to grant Gambian people their independence. It was a benefit. The benefit that the Gambian people derive from them becoming a member of the legislature, they were able to pass law to push further for the Gambia to realize development. Because during the colonial period, there was slow pace of development. Few roads were built, few schools were built, few hospitals, if not only 2 hospitals, were built for 400 years with high standards of living. Because of the Gambian people being part of the legislature, it leads to the formations of political party. That's why in history we have learned. The first political party to be established in this country was called the Gambia Democratic Party in 1951 by John Colifai. Because before the Gambia became, Gambian people become, or were allowed to join in the Legislative Council or become a member of the Legislative Council or National Assembly members at the time, there was no political parties formed by the Gambian people. All the political activities and the economic activities and the social activities were run and controlled by the colonial government. So because of the Gambian people being part of the legislature, it enabled the Gambian people to start to form their political party, to start to agitate for what you call independent, to start for agitating for economic and social reform in the Gambia, to improve the standards of living of the Gambian people, because the price of goods and services were relatively high. So these were all benefits that the Gambian people derive from the legislature at the colonial period. Yeah, Dabo, historic. Yeah, this is historic TV. So thank you so very much. Thank you. So Murla Minba, thank you for your question. It's very important. It's important. Your questions and your contributions are highly necessary. And with this, I believe people out there learning, and we will bring you more and more fascinating history. Oh, thank you so very much, man from Canada. What role did African collaboration play in helping the Europeans colonize Africa? Thank you so very much. There are certain Africans during the colonial period, during the early times, like our traditional rulers also play an important role, which enabled these European powers to colonize the African people for this long. After the scramble for and the partitions of Africa in 1884-1885 at Berlin, Germany, the European powers reached certain compromise, they reached certain decisions. Among those decisions was effective occupations. Among those decisions was to inform other European powers. Among those decisions were economic and social reform and the abolition or the suppression of the transatlantic slave trade. When the European people power started coming to Africa to colonize various territories in Africa, that is what we call in history stages in partition. Some of our African kings and chiefs, they don't resist any They have not done any resistance against European invading or colonizing their territories. In fact, they paved the way for the Europeans to have power to colonize our African people. They just allowed the European, they closed their eyes and allowed the European to take their lands and rule them and subjugate them and maltreat them now, take their resources from them. So, a way in which the African people paved the way for the European to colonize Africa was trade. The African people were trading with the European powers. In fact, they captured their own people and sell them to these European people. So the European people, they realized that these kings, they don't like their fellow black people. Perhaps let's go and colonize them. In fact, some of our kings and chiefs were part of fighting against their own fellow people to pave the way for the European to colonize our people. That is why Samori Ibn Lafayette Toure fought severely with the French for too long. He was the first African to use a modern war and modern military tactics to fight Europeans, not to colonize his territory. And finally, he surrendered because he was tired. Then he was killed, and his territory was finally colonized. So to answer your question, trade was a reason that enabled or aided the Europeans to colonize our African people trade. And then religion, of course. The Europeans came and introduced Christianity. And because of this Christianity, some of our African people completely surrendered. They succumbed to that religion. And as a result, they left or they surrendered. The European people finally colonized. So I believed I have answered your questions. Modlamin Ba. Thank you. That answers my questions. I want to know which time are always available here. I mean, you've been live so that I can be following. Of course, I will let you know which time I'm always live. In fact, from now on, every Saturday, I will be live. Yes, every Saturday, we will be live, Historic TV. So every Saturday, you can be live to of course, to follow us. That will be really, of course, grateful. That will really help. That will be really helpful. Every Saturdays will be live. Mudlamin Ba, was there any kind who was at last making life difficult to the British to protect his subject? Yes, there was a king who was making life very difficult for the British. That was called Fode Kaba Dumbe, the longest serving jihadist that ever existed in this country, Gambia, called Fode Kaba. And outside Gambia was Samori Toure. Fode Kaba was the longest serving jihadist. He was having a large army that were well trained and well equipped, very good at horse riding. He was having superior weapons. He fought severely. That's why the British, they realized that them alone cannot be able to liquidate Fode Kaba. They joined alliance with the French together with his great enemy called Musa Molo. So three group of people joined together to fight Fode Kaba. Musa Molo, the French in Senegal at the time, and the British. They launched a simultaneous assault on Fode Kaba. So they attacked Fode Kaba in all angles. So Fode Kaba had no route to escape. Then he was gunned down. Then Fode was among those marabouts who resisted to protect his subject, to protect the Gambia as well. That's why when Fode was killed, Gambia was finally colonized. Exactly. They could not have colonized the Gambia if Fode was alive. So Fode was among those marabouts, was a marabout. Exactly. Yeah, welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome. So thank you for there are some Africans who don't do nothing to make sure that Africans or Africa or their territories not to be colonized. So you can send your comments, and of course that's important. Thank you all for your comments, and because of you, the audience, we are still Saturday will be live every Saturday, perhaps 1 onwards. So you can target us around that time. We'll be live Saturdays. Yeah. So thank you, of course, for your comments. Thank you for your comments. So Murlamin Ba, Saturday, will be live at Saturday. So you can also help this channel through a platform called Buy Me Coffee. That will of course help us. And you can also react in this live video. So yeah. So this is Saturday Live, Historic TV. Yeah, Amolamin Ba, thank you so much, Honorable. You are indeed doing something great to school, to schools about our history. European did to us because the cause of poverty in Africa. Thank you so very much, Molamin. You are among those open-minded people to know that history is something that each and every person, because we are nothing without history. And the only thing that we learn history is we learn nothing from history. So it's important. Mulamin, thank you so very much for your comments, and of course for staying with us up to this time. We can't do nothing except to tell you that thank you, and of course be following us every Saturdays and sometimes Sunday. This is Historic TV Live, and of course we are about to start shooting our videos, and of course we'll upload the video soon. Perhaps you can watch, see, and of course comment or react to that video. So thank you all. The live is about to come to an end. We appreciate all of you, your contributions, for staying with us up to these 2 hours. It is really something that is worth to be appreciated of. So thank you. Thank you all.